Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something that I think resonates with pretty much everyone who's ever tried to learn something new or, make a change.
Absolutely. We've got this great collection of notes, a source document actually shared by one of you listening, and it all zeroes in on that big challenge.
Yeah.
How do you keep going when the motivation, well, starts to flicker?
Or it just completely dies out sometimes.
Exactly. And we're not just talking theory here. This deep dive is built around a real story. The journey of a young woman named Lena learning English.
It's her specific story,
Mm-hmm.
but the struggles, the insights,
Mm-hmm.
they feel universal. Whether you're learning code, an instrument, starting a business, whatever.
That's the idea. Our mission today is really to dig into Lena's experience and pull out those key takeaways, the things that can genuinely help you stay inspired, especially when that initial excitement is long gone and frankly, quitting feels like the easiest path.
Yeah, because it's not just about language, is it? It's about sticking with any goal, navigating those inevitable ups and downs. So, yeah, let's unpack this.
Okay, let's dive in.
All right, so where does the source say Lena's journey kicks off?
Well, the source introduces us to her in Ukraine, living a pretty quiet life in a small town. She works at her mom's bakery, reads books, watches movies. Seems okay, right?
Seems perfectly normal, but there's something bubbling under the surface.
Yeah, exactly. This quiet kind of aspiration. And the spark for English, interestingly, wasn't a practical need at first. The source really pinpoints it to watching the movie The Intern.
Oh, I know that movie.
Right. And she'd seen it before, but this one time, the specific line just hit differently. You're never wrong to do the right thing.
Huh. Just that one line.
Apparently, the source explains how that, quote, something about integrity and doing right somehow shifted her whole perspective on English. It wasn't just like a boring school subject anymore. It felt like a bridge.
A bridge. To what?
A bridge to maybe understanding a wider world, different perspectives, maybe even connecting with a future version of herself she hadn't quite imagined yet. It gave the language meaning beyond just words.
Wow. I love how a single movie moment can do that. Okay, so the dream is sparked, motivation's high. What about that initial phase, the honeymoon period?
Oh, yeah, the source describes that perfectly. It's that classic burst of energy we all recognize, right? She jumps in, signs up for an online course, joins a Facebook group, even starts trying to keep a diary in English.
Going all in.
Totally. For a few weeks, the source says she felt unstoppable. You know that feeling? Anything seems possible.
Absolutely. But then reality tends to set in, doesn't it? What does the source say happened next?
Predictably, yeah. That initial fire starts to sputter pretty fast. The source details the first, let's call it dip. She overslept one day, missed an online lesson.
Whoops. Happens to the best of us.
Right. Then the Wi-Fi was acting up. Then she had to work extra hours at the bakery. Suddenly, that dedicated study time she'd planned just starts getting squeezed out, smaller and smaller.
And you miss one day, then maybe another, and suddenly it's like, oh, wow, it's been almost 2 weeks since I even looked at that app. What was going through her head then, according to the source?
Well, that little voice of doubt starts whispering. The source says she began thinking things like, maybe this isn't for me, or maybe I'm just not actually good at learning languages. That initial excitement-based motivation, it just couldn't really stand up to the friction of everyday life.
That feels like such a critical point. That initial motivation will fade. It's almost guaranteed. It doesn't mean you're failing. It's just the nature of it.
Absolutely. It's part of the process. And the source brings in this lovely piece of wisdom from her grandfather here. He told her, you can light a fire again, even with cold hands. All you need is one match.
I like that. It's not about forcing the big bonfire back immediately.
Exactly. It's acknowledging the feeling might be gone, the enthusiasm might be cold, but the possibility of restarting, that's still there. You just need that one small spark.
Okay, so what was Lena's match in that moment? How did she relight the fire, according to the source?
It wasn't about trying to manufacture the feeling of motivation. The source describes a really simple, conscious action. She just sat down with her notebook and wrote one single sentence. I am not done yet.
Wow, just that.
Just that. A declaration of intent, not an expression of emotion. It was a decision.
That's really powerful. It shifts it from, I need to feel like doing this,
Hmm?
to, I've decided I am doing this, whether I feel like it or not.
Precisely. The source really emphasizes this shift in her approach. She stopped chasing that high of motivation and started instead focusing on building a practice, a
Good.
habit. She actually went back to the intern.
The movie again.
Yeah, but this time she didn't just watch it. She paused it after every single sentence and repeated it out loud for hours. It sounds painful, honestly.
That was incredibly tedious.
Right. But that deliberate, even painstaking repetition became her new foundation. It wasn't about fun. It was about building the skill, brick by brick.
So she finds her way back through sheer discipline and consistency. The source mentions she established routines, listening to audio, watching videos with subtitles, finding a speaking partner named Sophia. She felt pride again, but learning journeys are rarely smooth sailing, are they?
Oh, definitely not. The source details the next major hurdle. Winter arrives, which meant longer, tougher hours at the bakery. Her study time dwindled again, then pretty much disappeared.
Ugh, the winter slump combined with work pressure.
And to make matters worse, her speaking partner, Sophia, just stopped responding. Poof, gone. Her main support system vanished.
Oh no, that isolation must have been tough on top of everything else. What was the real low point described here?
The source paints a really vivid picture. It was January. She tries to open her notebook again, and she just feels completely lost, like she'd forgotten absolutely everything she'd learned.
That horrible feeling of going backward.
Exactly. The source says she just broke down crying, feeling overwhelmed, like all that effort had just evaporated. And that core doubt came roaring back. Why bother? Am I actually capable of this? Maybe I should just give up now.
This sounds like that classic wall learners hit. You're putting in the effort, or you were, but you feel stuck, maybe even regressing, and the end goal seems miles away. What was the turning point this time, according to the source?
It wasn't immediate. The source describes her sort of wandering into a local library one day, just needing a change of scenery, maybe. She picks up this old, dusty book, not looking for anything in particular,
Okay.
and she stumbles across this one sentence that just leaps out at her. Motivation doesn't keep you going. Meaning does.
Ah, there it is. That feels like the heart of it, doesn't it?
It really does. The source mentions her mother had actually said something similar earlier, like, motivation comes and goes, you need something deeper. But hearing it from this random book, in that moment of despair, it clicked.
So how did that realization change her approach?
It completely refocused her. The source explains she realized she'd been riding these waves of enthusiasm motivation, which are inherently unreliable. What she needed was to connect with her deeper purpose, the meaning behind it all. So she sat down and made a different kind of list.
Not grammar rules or vocabulary this time.
No, this was her reasons list, her true why. And the source gets really specific about what was on it.
Like what?
Things like being able to truly connect with her aunt in Canada, who she loved but could barely communicate with, understanding the world beyond her small town, becoming brave enough to share her own thoughts and story, being able to really listen to others, growing into the person she hoped to be.
So it wasn't just about mastering English grammar. It was about connection, bravery, growth,
Yeah.
living differently.
Exactly. That shift from an external goal, get fluent, to these deeply personal internal drivers, connect, be brave, grow, that became her anchor.
Okay, so she finds this deeper meaning, but motivation is still low, right? How does she translate that meaning into action when she just didn't feel like studying?
This is where the source highlights the power of systems and routines, even tiny ones, that aren't dependent on feeling motivated. It wasn't about finding big blocks of time anymore.
Small habits.
Really small, like listening to an English podcast while brushing her hair, learning just 5 new words during her lunch break, repeating a few phrases to herself before falling asleep. The source emphasizes these weren't huge leaps, but they were consistent, non-negotiable touch points with the language. They kept the connection alive.
That's such a key takeaway for anyone listening, I think. Don't wait to feel like it. Build the scaffolding, even if it's just tiny pieces.
Absolutely. The source uses Lena's persistence here to show how that why, that deeper meaning, allows you to keep those small systems running, even on days when enthusiasm is zero. It's that quiet, steady commitment that carries you through.
And what happens when you combine that deep meaning with those small, consistent actions, even tiny ones?
Well, the source shows that's when you start to notice the small wins. Lena didn't suddenly become fluent overnight, obviously, but she started consciously looking for and acknowledging these little moments where her effort actually paid off.
The source mentions an interaction at the bakery, right? Something about a pastry.
Yes, that's a perfect example. A tourist comes in, confused, looking for a specific cherry pastry. Lena helps them. Just a simple, maybe 2-minute conversation.
Seems minor.
Objectively, maybe. But the source says for Lena, it felt huge. Like, wow, I just helped someone navigate a situation in English. Me, I actually did that. That small victory wasn't just a nice moment. It was tangible proof her efforts were making a difference.
And this leads to the victory jar idea, doesn't it?
It does, which the source portrays as just a brilliant, simple practice. Every time she had one of these little successes, understanding a joke in a movie, using a new word correctly in a sentence, managing to write something without reaching for the dictionary, she'd jot it down on a scrap of paper.
And put it in the jar.
Yep. Things like understood a whole podcast episode, use the word eventually right, didn't give up today when I wanted to.
What effect did seeing that jar fill up have?
The source explains it built confidence, which is different from motivation. Motivation ebbs and flows, right? But seeing that physical collection of achievements, those quiet victories piling up, it built this deeper, more stable belief in her own ability to progress. It validated the grind.
It's like visual proof that the small steps add up.
Exactly. It combats that feeling of I'm getting nowhere. The source even notes that sharing one of her bakery stories online, getting it published somewhere small that came out of this period, that felt like a massive small win.
Okay, so she's found her meaning, built habits, learned to celebrate the small wins. Confidence is growing. Smooth sailing from here.
If only. The source makes it clear the journey isn't over. She hits another major wall around April. And this time, it wasn't just low motivation, it was sheer physical and mental exhaustion.
Burnout.
Total burnout, the long bakery hours, the constant effort. Her brain just felt fried. The source says she couldn't even seem to understand her own study notes anymore. Everything felt hard.
And the motivation.
It didn't just dip. The source says she felt like she didn't even care anymore, which is a scary place to be. Those negative thoughts came flooding back louder than ever. This is pointless. You've hit your limit. You'll never actually be fluent. Just stop pretending. That feeling of being utterly alone in the struggle crept back in.
Ugh, that sounds incredibly demoralizing. How did the source describe her getting through that particular wall? Sounds different from the earlier dips.
It was different. And the key insight the source presents here is that the way through wasn't about pushing even harder. It was actually about pausing, resting, and crucially, finding some joy again.
Not more discipline, but ease.
Sort of. She actually stumbled upon her victory jar again during this low point. And the source says just seeing all those little slips of paper, that tangible history of her progress, it served as a powerful reminder. Okay, I might feel like I'm at zero right now, but I'm not starting from zero. I've actually come a long way.
Ah, so the evidence of past wins provided perspective during the current struggle. That makes sense.
Precisely. And instead of forcing herself back to the grammar books, the source describes her making a conscious choice to just rest, to allow herself simple pleasures, making a cup of tea and just sitting quietly, listening to an old favorite song just because she liked it, watching an English video purely for enjoyment without the pressure to learn or analyze every word.
Letting the brain breathe. Recognizing that learning needs joy too, not just grind.
The source really emphasizes that beautifully. Stepping back wasn't admitting defeat, it was strategic recharging. It was reconnecting with the why in a gentle, non-demanding way. And interestingly, the source shows this pause actually enabled the next breakthrough.
How so?
Shortly after this period of rest, she had another encounter helping tourists, this time finding the train station. She gave directions, and the source notes that this time it felt different. Clear, confident, natural.
And they complimented her English.
They did. And the source highlights that this time she didn't just brush it off or dismiss it, she actually heard it. And more importantly, she believed it. That moment of genuine self-acceptance, earned through the struggle and the necessary rest, that was the real turning point from that wall of burnout.
Wow. The source sums this up powerfully, doesn't it? Something about the walls.
Yeah, it says, every wall she faced was not a dead end. It was a place to pause, reflect, and climb again. It reframes those setbacks completely.
Not failures, just necessary plateaus for rest and reevaluation. Okay, so she's navigated the burnout wall.
Yeah.
What comes next?
Well, remember Sophia, the speaking partner who disappeared?
Yeah.
The source says she suddenly reappears, and she suggests Lena join this online English-speaking group she's part of.
Ooh, okay. Lena's reaction.
Immediate fear, according to the source. Total panic. They'll all be better than me. I'll freeze up. I won't understand. I'll sound stupid. All those classic speaking anxieties.
Oh, that fear of judgment is so real, especially when it comes to speaking a language you're learning. What made her do it anyway?
The source points back to something she'd written in her journal earlier, that little mantra. If it scares you a little, maybe it's the right thing. So heart absolutely pounding, she logs into the video call.
And what was that first experience like? As scary as she imagined?
The source does a great job capturing the tension. Her heart's racing. She manages this simple little introduction. Hi, I'm Lena. I love baking. But then she starts talking about pastries, something she genuinely knows and loves.
Something comfortable.
Exactly. And as she talks, she looks around the virtual room and realizes everyone else is just trying too. People are stumbling over words, helping each other out, smiling. There's no judgment, just shared effort.
And what was the big takeaway from that moment?
The source puts it very succinctly. Fear lives in silence. Confidence grows in sound. Just by speaking, by making the sounds, even imperfectly, the fear started to lose its grip.
That's huge.
It really is. The source mentions she eventually felt comfortable enough to share her whole learning story with the group, the ups and downs. And the response wasn't criticism, it was connection, applause. That experience really shifted something for her, moving her from being fearful of speaking to feeling, well, maybe not fearless, but definitely less afraid.
Okay, so confidence is up. She's speaking more freely. She's hit some goals. And then the source mentions that familiar feeling creeping back in. Okay, what now? How did she navigate that?
It actually led her back to her why, but on a much deeper level this time. The source describes her rereading those letters from her aunt in Canada, but this time it wasn't just about translating the words.
What was it then?
She finally felt the meaning behind them. The connection, the distance, the shared family history, the longing to bridge that gap with shared language. The source calls this her profound why list.
Going beyond the practical benefits.
Way beyond. It wasn't just about opportunities or skills anymore. It was about family, about bridging emotional distance, about fully becoming that brave, connected version of herself she'd envisioned way back at the start. And interestingly, the source notes that when she shared this deeper why with her speaking group, it resonated deeply and helped others connect with their own core motivations too.
So finding her deeper meaning actually helped others find theirs.
Mm.
That's lovely. And the story takes another turn here, doesn't it? Someone new enters the picture.
It does. The source introduces a young man named Amir. He shows up at the bakery looking kind of lost and needs help improving his English for a job interview.
And Lena sees herself in him.
Absolutely. The source says she recognized that same uncertainty, that need for just a little bit of help and encouragement to build that bridge. And even though she wasn't, a qualified teacher or anything,
She decides to help him anyway.
yes, she starts sharing what worked for her based on her own messy, real journey. Practical phrases, interview tips, but mostly just building his confidence. The source highlights this really touching moment after Amir actually gets the job. He comes back and tells Lena, "No, we did it," acknowledging her role.
Wow. That's a powerful insight right there. Learning is great for you, but sharing what you've learned, that's transformational.
Exactly. The source makes the point that by helping Amir, Lena wasn't just being kind, she was reinforcing her own understanding, gaining new confidence in her ability to communicate effectively, and experiencing the profound satisfaction of, as the source puts it, lighting the path for someone else.
And the source uses her aunt's letters again as a symbol here, right?
Beautifully, yes. She reads the old letters again, and this time the understanding is complete, the feeling is there, and then the source says she makes a decision to write back in English.
Without agonizing over perfection.
Exactly, trusting herself. The source frames that letter sent with courage and the desire to connect, rather than perfect grammar as a symbol of her entire journey. Overcoming doubt, celebrating small wins, breaking through walls. The key idea being, connection is more important than perfection. She finally felt like a communicator.
Such incredible growth. But the journey still isn't over, is it? Because the source mentions motivation dipping again later on. This feels important to include.
Yes, absolutely crucial. The source makes it clear this path isn't a straight upward line. Later on, life gets incredibly busy. Exhaustion from the bakery sets in again, deep fatigue. And for about 3 weeks, the source says she just stops. All English activities cease.
And this wasn't like the strategic pause earlier.
No, this felt different, more like sliding backward, and for a scary moment, the source says, she found herself not really caring that she was sliding. That negative spiral started again. Maybe I really have reached my limit. Maybe I'm just not wired to finish things.
How did she pull out of that cycle? It sounds insidious.
Again, the source shows it wasn't a big dramatic event. It was a quiet internal moment. She's sitting there maybe with a cup of cold tea, just reflecting on the whole journey, the start, the dips, the walls she'd already climbed. And this quiet thought surfaces. What if this feeling, this exhaustion, this pause, What if this is just part of the journey, too?
Accepting the dip rather than fighting it or judging yourself for it.
Exactly. Self-compassion instead of self-criticism. The source captures the power of that quiet acceptance. She literally wrote down, "I'm tired, I feel like quitting, but I won't." Just acknowledging the reality of the feeling, but reaffirming the decision.
Simple but profound.
And from that place of acceptance, she didn't try to jump back into hours of study. She implemented a truly sustainable plan. 10 minutes a day, anything English. Listen to one song, read a news headline, practice 5 words. Just maintain the connection, however small.
10 minutes. That feels manageable even on the worst days.
Right. And the source points out the quiet victory wasn't just doing the 10 minutes, but being able to tell a friend honestly, "Yeah, I had a really hard time, but I didn't actually quit." This phase wasn't about fireworks. It was about finding that steady, quiet faith in persistence. The simple power of, "I'm not done."
And then growing out of this quiet persistence,
Mm-hmm.
the source brings in something unexpected,
Right.
an opportunity.
Yeah, it's lovely how it unfolds. First, a regular customer at the bakery, Mrs. Cohen, just casually remarks on how much Lena's English has improved, how clear she sounds, a little external validation.
Nice boost.
And then, completely out of the blue, an email arrives. Remember that essay she wrote and shared online during an earlier phase? It had been selected for some kind of international online event focused on learner stories. They wanted her to speak live.
Wow. Talk about fear and excitement colliding.
Totally. The source shows her grappling with the nerves, the familiar doubts. Can I do this? But also the thrill. She practices, prepares, but ultimately decides to speak from the heart, sharing her real, messy, up and down journey.
And the impact on the audience.
The source mentions people reaching out afterwards saying things like, "Your story inspired me." And Lena has this realization, you never know who's watching your quiet effort. That essay, born from her own struggles, somehow became a source of strength for others.
That connects back to helping Amir, doesn't it? This idea of teaching or sharing becoming part of her purpose.
Exactly. The source shows this becoming much clearer for her now. She starts informally inviting local teenagers to the bakery after hours, just to practice English conversation. Not as a formal teacher, but as someone who's been through it.
Using her own experience as the curriculum.
Precisely. It wasn't about grammar drills. It was about building confidence, sharing struggles, creating a safe space based on empathy. This little English circle starts to grow. The source even mentions Amir, calling her a natural teacher, recognizing her gift wasn't expertise but connection. She was genuinely making a difference.
And all these threads, the persistence, the speaking, the teaching, the deeper why, they culminate in the final chapter the source describes.
Right.
The big decision.
They do. She receives an unexpected job offer. A language school in the nearby city needs an assistant teacher. Someone relatable for beginner and intermediate students.
Oh. Leaving of the bakery, the small town.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Huge, a massive leap outside her comfort zone. The source acknowledges the fear, the uncertainty of stepping into a more formal role, a bigger environment.
But she takes it.
She does. The source says she consciously leaned on her why, that deep desire for continued learning, for growth, for helping and inspiring others like herself. She packs her bags, her notebooks, and, as the source puts it, her courage.
And starting this new chapter.
The source gives us a glimpse of her first days. Facing those familiar doubts again, am I really qualified? Am I good enough? But this time, she has this wealth of experience, her whole journey to draw on. She connects with her students through shared vulnerability.
So the source really lands the final point there. Motivation isn't about banishing fear or doubt.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging the fear and moving forward anyway, driven by that deeper sense of meaning and purpose. Lena's journey continues, the source implies. She's now part of her students' stories, embodying that core idea. Motivation, rooted in meaning, truly holds the power to change your own life and ripple outwards to change the lives of others.
What a journey. Lena's story, as laid out in the source material, it's just such a powerful illustration that learning, growing, achieving anything worthwhile,
Yeah.
it's never a straight line, is it?
Never. It's messy, it's full of stops and starts, moments where you feel brilliant and moments where you feel like giving up completely. And that's okay. That's normal.
And the takeaways for anyone listening facing their own challenges are so clear. That initial burst of motivation is just the spark plug, not the whole engine.
Absolutely. You need that deeper why, something personal and meaningful to keep you anchored when the weather gets rough.
And crucially, don't wait until you feel motivated to act. Build the habits, the routines, even just 10 minutes. Those small, consistent actions are what build momentum.
Right. And celebrate every single tiny win. That victory jar concept is brilliant, but find whatever works for you. Acknowledge the progress. Those little proofs build real, lasting confidence in a way fleeting motivation never can.
And hitting a wall, it doesn't mean you failed. The source makes that so clear. It's often a signal that you need to pause, rest, maybe find some joy again, and look back at how far you've actually come.
Yeah, and speaking up, doing the thing imperfectly, whether it's speaking a language or launching the project or whatever your thing is, that's how you build confidence. Action diminishes fear.
And finally, that unexpected power of sharing your journey, helping others along the way. It reinforces your own learning and gives the whole effort an even richer meaning.
Your own journey, listener, might look totally different from Lena's on the surface. But these underlying principles, finding meaning, persevering through dips, celebrating small steps, allowing for rest, connecting with others, they're universal.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe take a moment to think about your own learning journey, whatever that might be right now. What's your deepest why? The reason that goes beyond the surface goal.
Can you identify one small win from the past week, maybe even just from today, and really let yourself feel good about it? Or maybe commit to just 10 minutes of practice tomorrow, no matter how you feel.
Or perhaps, if you feel like you're staring at a wall right now, could you give yourself permission to pause? To look back at your own victory jar, even if it's just mental, and find one tiny manageable step forward, trusting, like Lena learned, that even cold hands can light that fire again.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive exploring Lena's story and the enduring challenge of staying motivated.